Great. Thanks, Todd. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the piracy component. So we've talked about this a little bit, sort of leading up to it, and I just want to address that part head on before we get into the second half of our conversation here. So how to be a pirate. And step 0 in being a pirate is to acquire a parrot. There's a lot of discussion about this on the online forums between the pirates, whether this is actually still required, but I'm a traditionalist, so I'm going to stick with that. Step 1 is to find an industry with high-value assets and exploitable authentication methods. And if that doesn't sound familiar, then you should think a little bit more about our industry, because that's exactly what's happening. And if someone chooses to be a pirate, they've come to the right place, and so they're in business at this point. And as Hillary was mentioning, there's different motivations for predatory publishers. Well, there's different motivations for pirates and piracy in our industry, and so there's a few different ways that can be achieved. So mass downloading, this is the wholesale downloading of PDFs or content scraping, things of that nature. And certainly this is a nefarious activity. This is not someone who's doing this sort of casually. And our response to that has been things around abuse monitoring and basically trying to identify those patterns. Data breaches, so this is like traditional hacking. This is trying to get into systems and being able to compromise access via illegal methods. And we've fought that via security programs and protocols and things like that. This is everyone in IT. This is not just our industry. And then we get into uploading of protected content. So maybe you have access to a PDF and somebody asked for it online and you post it on a site. This is getting more into intent and whether this is someone who's really trying to compromise, wholesale an entire industry or a swath of content, or did they really think that they're one of the 88% who think that it's okay to do that. And so the way we deal with that is takedowns and notifications of various forms. And then the last one is password sharing. And this is something that's definitely in that 88% where people don't think it's a problem. Certainly I don't share my passwords with anyone, but if you think it's okay to post it online, then you need some education on that front as well. And it's this last vector that's made Sci-Hub really a particularly effective mechanism to absorb most of the world's knowledge. So just to talk a little bit about why is there a Sci-Hub? Some of the previous speakers have alluded and actually spoken a little bit about this, but the question is really, how did we get here, right? So there's always been, content sharing. Back in the day, there used to be mills that would copy PDFs and then staple them together and sell them for $2 as a sort of a fake copy of a journal. But how did we get here with Sci-Hub in particular? Is it because of pricing? Well, this is when this whole news broke back in late 2015. A lot of the press was talking about the price of buying an article at $40 or something like that. Well, we all know that most of our access is through institutions, and so that's not necessarily the use case that we're talking about here. Oops. Availability. So this is a legitimate. The data proves this actually is that most of Sci-Hub's users are coming from China, India, Iran, North Korea, those kinds of countries, and so are there Hinari type programs that can provide legal paths forward for some of that content, or is it really something that is out of our sphere? Convenience. So this is another big one, right? So Sci-Hub is super easy. They designed it to be extremely user-friendly. And so when we, on the one hand, are talking about multiple access methods, especially off-campus and institutions that can get onerous and difficult, versus going to a Sci-Hub where you drop in a DOI and away you go. That's where there's a sort of a gap between authorized and unauthorized use. And the technical angle, so there, in the beginning I talked a little bit about how all the different vectors for pirating content. And for Sci-Hub, it appears that the majority of that is through shared passwords, and the individuals have either donated their credentials for their subscriptions to allow to be used for Sci-Hub, or they've been the target of a phishing email or something of that nature that has compromised their username and password. So most institutions have a number of individuals that have credentials in the Sci-Hub database that we've been able to find. Some are worse than others, though, that's for sure. The problem with the Sci-Hub problem is that there isn't one solution. So we can't go and specifically prevent a user from using Sci-Hub. We can't specifically prevent a valid username and password from going through our systems, because at that point we don't know that it's been compromised. And so because the volume of it is underneath the threshold of many of our abuse monitoring systems, it's hard to come up with that single solution. So really the ultimate solution on something like a Sci-Hub is to be industry-wide. So we need education at the institutional level. We need better security protocols at the institutional and platform levels. We need publishers, certainly like Elsevier, working against copyright infringement and things of that nature. And so it has to be a multi-faceted front on the problem. So there's a couple of different strategies around resolving the Sci-Hub issue. Resolving seems very optimistic at this point, but we'll go with that. Takedown, so this is, Peter Katz is obviously deeply involved with Elsevier's effort on that front. Of course, that requires that you are operating in a system with a copyright law that is respected mutually, which is obviously difficult. Takedowns also can, this is an actual article from last year, can also be automated in a way that have incorrect or unintended outcomes. So in this case, Warner Brothers asked Google to take all their sites down, which they obliged. Didn't make their SEO team happy. Another thing we can do is we can standardize best practices. So for example, if things like easy proxy or proxy servers, and those need to be configured in a way that gives the proper security level. So the default installation is no longer acceptable on that front. And so working with the folks at OCLC and other institutions to get sort of a minimum level of security that's going to make sure that we've got the information we need in order to battle this front. And then finally, moving beyond basic IP authentication. And not to confuse the issue, that's not necessarily how Sci-Hub is gaining their content, but the IP authentication piece is one that is very, very exploitable, and certainly something that exposes all of our content to compromise. And so I've been doing variations on this talk sort of off and on for year and a half since the Sci-Hub thing broke open, and I used to end it here, and it was deeply unsatisfying because there was really nothing else to talk about other than sort of a call to bring everyone together and talk about additional options. But I'm very pleased to say a lot's happened in the last year and a half with a number of authentication initiatives and things that are moving the industry in a direction where we can secure our assets, but also keep it user-friendly and convenient for researchers as well. And so I'm going to pass it on to Dan, who's going to talk about some of those things. Thank you.